continue to make progress, to build those networks, to talk with one another, to learn from one another, and to hear from an incredible panel who have had their own journey to the offices that they hold. In Massachusetts, we're also seeing the results of building those networks, where we saw more women arriving in elected office. We're seeing changes in our own legislative demographic, but we also know that we have more work to do on that front too. So we'll hear a little bit more about some of the newly elected officials who are with us. And more women are stepping up in record numbers, not just into elected offices, but into the spaces where women can make a difference, influencing things in their community, in the classroom, and a range of programs. And so all of us, when we work together, can make a difference with our voices. And when we see this happening, it's not just with elected officials, it's not just with women. Just last Friday, we saw young citizens across the country putting their voices to work on climate change, saying we've got to be taking up some of these issues. So those voices matter in a functioning and healthy and progressive democracy. And they were really strong voices. And today in this room, right before you all gathered in here, in this room, there was a collection of fabulous young women from leadership programs in the community. We were joined by young women from the BPS, the BINCA program, the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester, the Chica Project, the Girl Scouts and South Boston Neighborhood House. Are those young women still here with us? Are any of you still here? If you're here, could you stand up so we can recognize you? Awesome. So what was so special about what this group of young women leaders did was they took up the topic of term limits. And they had rigorous conversation about it in this room. They exchanged ideas, they made speeches, they had differences of opinion and perspective. They talked about collaboration and compromise. They talked about the importance of making room at the table for new voices and new perspectives. And they did it with such class and dignity and poise. And I thought, we're going to just get a big bus. So everyone, we're going to put you on it. We're going to send you down to DC because you did a fabulous job. So thank you, ladies. That was really awesome. And your voices and your perspectives matter. So keep raising those voices, keep having the conversations, keep participating in your own democracy. You're the future, and if the future is like you, it's going to be magnificent. So I thank you for that inspiration. And we do our best work when we're working with community-based organizations and with our partners that helped us build tonight's program. So I just want to read through the list of incredible partners who have helped us pull together this evening's program. AAUW Work Smart in Boston, the Asian American Women's Political Initiative, the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Ann, it's great to see you here. The Chica Project, the City of Boston and Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, Emerge, Massachusetts, the Gloria Cordes Larson Center for Women in Business at Bentley University, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, the Latina Circle, the League of Women Voters Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, Spark Boston, Strong Women, Strong Girls, and the YW of Boston. Could we have a round of applause for all of our partners who help us? We're very proud of those partnerships and the work that we do together, because we do work better when we're doing this together. And I want to thank my team here at the Institute that did a fabulous job in organizing this evening's program. Claire Cooper, Kelly Bovio, Summer Ordaz. There's just an incredible team here. So thank you to all the team at the Institute. And it's important that we do these and we have these conversations, and it's inspirational because when we think about including more voices in the process, we are enriching and building and strengthening our democracy. And tonight we're going to have a conversation with some women leaders who are doing just that. So I'm going to take a moment and introduce the members of our panel. I will invite them up for a conversation. But as I think about what's happening in the Institute, if you get a chance, take a look in the far corner of the Institute. We have a wonderful exhibit called A Seat at the Table. And it looks at the history of Shirley Chisholm and the famous words of, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Make your way to the table, make your space. And we have some women with us tonight who did just that, who made spaces and who continue to make space for others at the tables that they occupy. So we thank you for that. And we're joined tonight, I'm going to, in no particular order, just run through, and you have more detail about these incredible women in your program, so please take a look at that. but we are delighted tonight to be joined by Councilor Andrea Campbell, who has served the City of Boston's District 4, not too far away from us, since 2015, and she is currently the Council President. In 2017, thank you, Andrea. In 2017, the councilor secured the first ever dedicated city budget line item to specially funded youth development programming and youth-serving organizations. Councilor Campbell also took part in a women's leadership program here at the Institute when we first began, so it is always a pleasure to welcome the Council President back to the Institute. Thank you, Andrea. We are also joined by Mayor Kim Driscoll, who's in her 4th term of serving the City of Salem. Previously, Mayor Driscoll was a city councilor. She was the first woman elected mayor in Salem. Thank you. Under her leadership, Boston Magazine called Salem one of Massachusetts' best places to live. I lived in Salem for a while, so I can attest to that. Mayor, we are grateful for your participation in this panel. Thank you for being with us. I'm delighted that we are joined this evening by State Representative Hannah Kane, who has represented the 11th Worcester District since 2015, where she was elected upon a special election. She also serves as an elected town meeting member and appointed member of the Shrewsbury Finance Committee, the Shrewsbury Public Schools Foundation, where she serves as president, and is a member of the Shrewsbury Coalition for Addiction Prevention and Education. We were honored to have the representative with us as she greeted school kids from her district, and Representative, we are delighted to have you with us this evening. Thank you so very much. And one of Representative Kane's newest colleagues is with us this evening, and she is Representative Tram Wen. She was elected in November 2018 to the 18th Essex District, representing Andover, North Andover, Tewksbury, and Boxborough. Representative Wen unseated Jim Lyons, who held the seat since 2010. In doing so, she became the first Vietnamese American woman elected to the Massachusetts legislature. It's wonderful to have you with us tonight. Before her election to office, the representative worked in Greater Boston Legal Services as a legal aid attorney, where she advocated for domestic violence survivors, workers, seniors, veterans, and children. Representative, it is a delight to have you join us and to join the state legislature as well. And in Chelsea, we are delighted to welcome Damali Vidot with us this evening. She is the Councilor at Large and the Council President. She is a proud community advocate and a fierce representative for ensuring that the residents of Chelsea are well represented and well served. The council was on hand last year in 2018 for our conference, and we are thrilled to have you join us this year as a panelist. Thank you so much, Councilor, for being with us. And to moderate this impressive panel of women trailblazers, the Institute is delighted to welcome and honored to welcome this evening Janet Wu. Janet is an Emmy Award-winning political reporter at WCVB and co-host of the public affairs show On the Record. So Janet, thank you so much for being with us and for moderating tonight's panel. I'm going to turn it over to Janet Wu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I have to tell you, I can't believe that I'm actually doing this event here. As Mary has told you, or as some of you may know, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been a reporter here in Boston for over 40 years, and I've covered 10 presidential campaigns. And the very first presidential campaign I ever covered was in 1980. And the very first candidate out of the probably over 100 candidates that I've interviewed, people who have been running for president, was Ted Kennedy. But my favorite story about Ted Kennedy didn't take place in 1980. It took place about 15 or 20 years later. And he was in town and he was doing an event in Brookline, and I was supposed to catch up with him. And I don't even remember what the story was about, but I remember it was controversial. It was something that he probably didn't want to give me an answer to, but he really had no choice because it was a public event and I was there. And as you all know as elected officials, at least one of your biggest problems is dealing with people like me, the media. So he sees me, he gets out of his car, he sees me, he comes up to me, and the first thing he says, "Oh, Janet, how are you?" He goes, "How have you been? Have you lost some weight? I've noticed that you look like you lost some weight." And of course, who doesn't like to hear that they've lost some weight? He goes, Vicki and I just started a new diet. Next thing you know, I'm sitting there exchanging tips with him on diets. And I'm sitting there going, oh, wait a minute, what am I supposed to ask him? What was this all about? And I know that I was full of fire and brimstone when I first started, but by the time I actually got around to asking him the question, I walked away, and I remember my photographer looked at me and said, what the heck was that all about? Where did you go? What's going on here? So if there was anybody that could really manipulate the media, but in a very quiet, pleasant way, it was Ted Kennedy. So with that, we will start. I am going to ask one question to start this conversation off, and I don't know who wants to go first, but you can just chime in whenever you're ready. Well, maybe we'll start with Damali at the end, and we'll come down. But then after that, the conversation is going to be free-flowing, and we're just going to let people chime in, and we'll hopefully leave some time for everyone, and especially those of you that are up there to ask some questions as well. So my question is, why did you run? Why did you run the very first time you ran?
First and foremost, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, to be able to represent my community, and just, I got a seat at the table. I come from Chelsea, a majority Latino community, and at the time I was serving as an activist. There was not one Latino on the council, nor was there anybody on the council that felt that they needed to respond to my concerns. And so I kind of wanted to push the status quo, so I chose to run for office. I knew that I had a young daughter in the school system that was looking to me, and I needed to set an example. I needed to make space for her and other young people, and you know, we're an immigrant community and people who didn't have voices, so that was initially why I chose to run. I mean, it's a much longer story, but I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak.
Tromwin?
Well, echoing Damali, thank you so much for having me here. And to be honest, to be with such inspiring women, I'm nervous. I was inspired to run after the 2016 election. I think that after the 2016 election, many of us felt there was a push, there was a fire in us to get more involved. And then we had the Women's March, and I became much more involved and active in my own community. And at the time, as was introduced earlier, I was a legal aid attorney. So not only did I represent clients in the courtroom, I also did a lot of legislative advocacy. And one of the frustrating things was for me to try to meet with my state rep. For 2 years, I tried to reach out to him to talk about the different issues that I was working on, including paid family medical leave, earned income tax credit, and so many other important bills. To me, government should be working for the people. We're supposed to be representative of the people, and how can you represent the people if you're not listening to them, if you're not hearing the issues that they're facing on the ground? And for me, I ran because I know I have the skill sets, and I know that I have what it takes to make government more accessible to the people, and it shouldn't be a mystery, and that's what I'm continuing to do.
Anna?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm thrilled to be here. I was here once before, and it was with some 8th graders from part of the district that I represent, and it was great to be here with them then, and I'm glad to be back here tonight. I grew up in Maine, and when I was born in 1971, Margaret Chase Smith was the senator, and she was the first woman to serve in both the U.S. House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate. And it never once in my life occurred to me that that wasn't something you can do if you wanted to do it. And so I always sort of grew up with the belief that at some point I would serve in public service. My parents were both educators. My grandparents were very involved in their communities. When I was young, one of my good friends, her father worked, he was a state rep, and so we would go up and serve as pages in the summer. And so I just had early exposure to public service, and it was something that I always knew I wanted to do in my life. I just wasn't exactly sure in what stage of my life I would be able to take it on. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight, and I'm very excited to be on the panel of women, and I'm excited to have this year in the legislature, we moved up from I think 26.5 to 28.5% of the legislature, so excited to welcome one of my new colleagues here tonight as well with me.
Definitely thanks for having me. I can feel the energy in the room, so it's great to be here and to be on this panel for sure. I ran for mayor in 2005 primarily because I was sick and tired and couldn't take it anymore. Why a lot of women actually tend to run for office. I loved the city of Salem. I had experience working in municipal government, and I just saw a community that had amazing bones and a really amazing history and wasn't taking full advantage of what we had and felt like I could give something back. I was a frustrated resident who saw somewhat of an old boys club operating in my community and really feeling like we have got to be better than this. And thankfully, was not born in Salem. I didn't have a strong base there. It was definitely an uphill battle, but it worked out. So pleased to be there now, still running an amazing place.
Andrea.
First of all, thank you to the EMK Institute and Mary and everyone for being here, and thank you for the invitation. It's exciting to join you guys. Born and raised in the city of Boston, thank you. Product of all Boston public schools. I'm a lawyer by training, and I worked with Governor Patrick during his second term, and I could give him some of the credit for deciding to run, but I ultimately give it to my twin brother. And I talk about my twin Andre all the time. It was Andre and Andrea growing up in the city of Boston. He cycles in and out of the criminal justice system and passes away while in the custody of the Department of Correction, which oversees our prisons here in Massachusetts, at the age of 29 years old. He had a disease called scleroderma and doesn't get adequate health care, and the rest is sort of tragic history. And so I just jumped into this work, challenged a 32-year incumbent with one simple question: how do two twins born and raised in the city of Boston have such different life outcomes? I left Latin school and went to Princeton University and then UCLA for law school, and the rest is history, right? But I said, I don't want to be an exception. I want everyone to have the same access to the same opportunities and resources I had. Growing up in the city of Boston, I don't know if this is still working. Perfect.
It's working.
Growing up in the city of Boston, and so every single day I bring my personal story, all of me, into this work. I think it's my God-given purpose what I'm doing. I don't leave my faith at the door of City Hall, and I do it in partnership with incredible women. So I'm excited to be the first Black woman as council president, and thank you. But more importantly, I always love to highlight, not just that, I like to highlight the fact that we are representing, I'm leading a body that has 6 women of color out of the 13, the first in the history of the city of Boston. That's a big deal, and we should celebrate that. So I'm excited to be here with all of you to answer your questions, and especially the young people up top. Thank you for being here as well.
I think the thing that's most interesting out of what I heard here is that most of you did not intend to be a politician. Most of you did not intend to run for office. And that's the message that especially those of you that are younger should walk away and remember tonight. My second question is very similar to the first one, but it gives you a chance to give a little bit nuance to what you're talking about tonight. And the question is, given today's political climate, as we know it is quite something, what specifically makes you feel that you need to be a voice in this conversation? What do you bring specifically that you're afraid will not be talked about if you were not there?
So I will start. I am one of 7 Republican women in the legislature. Out of 200 members, there are 7 Republican women. There's no Republican women in the Senate. And I mentioned earlier I grew up in Maine, and Margaret Chase Smith was my role model, and she was a very moderate Republican. There were other great moderate Republicans who represented Maine, Senator Olympia Snowe, Senator Susan Collins. I just grew up in sort of that model of understanding what was important. I'm not a huge believer in party, to be honest with you. I think it's becoming an antiquated system, and many people use it as a shortcut to identify you without actually doing any work to see what you're all about. But again, I ran in 2015, and I have been a registered Republican since I registered to vote. But in today's world, I'm very afraid that my party is becoming known by only one individual, and I think that that is a disservice. I will also say I've been a Republican a lot longer than the current president has been a Republican. But I think that, I never used to identify in anything as a Republican. I didn't run with it on my literature because I wanted people in my community to vote for me. They knew who I was. They knew how I operated. They knew what I could do. So it never seemed important. But after the 2016 election, I started introducing myself as a Republican because I wanted especially young people out there who might be thinking, oh, I appreciate a lot about the party, but now I don't think I can be in it, to understand that a party is not one person. We're at a point in time, and a party has a history and it has a future. And I wanted to be part of that conversation.
Very interesting.
I'll just add, I think everyone here on the panel has a unique background and professional and personal experience that informs the work, and what does it mean to have more experiences at the table. So when I got to the council, I talked about criminal justice reform. I talked about reentry. I talked about folks who are currently behind the walls, meaning prison. I talked about the effects of trauma from having a parent who was incarcerated. My father was incarcerated for the first 8 years of my life. So you bring, I think, unique experiences and stories to the conversation. I talk about persistent inequities in the city of Boston, not just using my personal story to highlight it, but to talk about, Dorchester and Mattapan continue to be left behind in many respects when it comes to quality schools, access to transportation, good jobs, closing the wealth gaps. So naming that. And lastly, I talk about race and racism and busing. In order for us to truly grapple with the tough issues plaguing us today, that historical context is important, and we have to name it. And government really has to name it, given that it was a perpetrator of injustice for some time. So what does it mean to truly name that? And I'm not afraid to do that. Actually, I'm bringing the council through a racial equity training, and that was one of my goals as council president, to have everyone grapple with race and racism and understanding these terms we sometimes just throw around, and equity and inequity and what does it mean to the difference between equity and equality. And so I think that just for me is important. But I think if I weren't there, we wouldn't be necessarily having that conversation, and I'm sure everyone can highlight some specifics too.
I'm not going to ask you to name any names, but were you surprised by the reaction or the questions that you got when you were doing this training?
The racial equity training?
Yes.
So I started in February of last year trying to get funding for it. Most of the money that comes into government goes to the mayor's side or the administrative side. And I said, well, what about this incredible legislative branch of government called the Boston City Council? Can we get some money? And so I went to the foundations and said, Boston Foundation, you're putting out these reports about inequities and closing gaps. Well, I need your money to help bring my council through this training so that we have the tools to address these inequities together. It's one thing to talk about it, but we need to understand that, sort of have a shared understanding, to have the tools to address the issues. So people are excited, and it's not just for the counselors, it's going to be for the staff and the team that also work with us and support us, which I think is incredibly important.
I think one of the things I'm excited about when it comes to local government and some of the things that's happening both at nationally and thankfully not in our state house, the friction that exists in government, I think, has forced people to think locally about how to solve problems, the ability to get things done. And I'm a huge fan of local government. If you think about the services you rely on as a constituent, the most important services that you rely on get delivered at the local level, whether it's educating your kids, keeping your neighborhood safe, those great spaces, those great places in your community where you make memories or really enjoy a high quality of life, those are all delivered at the local level. And for being the first woman mayor in my community, to think that those important conversations, those important discussions related to those very services that people rely on most directly. I joke that we'd never have a shutdown in local government. This federal shutdown would never happen at the local level. Try not picking up somebody's trash for one day, right? Or a school being closed, and it's just unheard of. It's also nonpartisan, so we're not necessarily caught in ideological conversations about services that people are relying on. And to think that Salem, almost 400 years old, in 2026, we'll be celebrating our quadricentennial, there was not a female CEO of our community involved in the discussion about those delivery of those services that we rely on so much. Today we have a female school superintendent, a female police chief, a number of senior leadership positions are women. I've been mayor for 14 years. During that time frame, I've had an opportunity to see the number of female elected mayors increase. It kind of ebbs and flows, but when we sit around and have had conversations with other female women, they're running because they see other women in office. So I think there's something that happens when you see somebody else who can do it 3 kids, 3, 5, and 8 when I was elected. So if you see other people engaging in these conversations, you see yourself doing it, and I think it's so important that we have that perspective around the table when we're talking about these very important services that are happening at the local level. And I think women in particular are a little more used to getting involved at the local level, and I'm really grateful for the position that I have, but also to be able to help see other people in these roles as well.
So if anyone questions for 1 second her passion for local government, let me just tell you, if I had a nickel for every time I asked Kim Driscoll if she was interested in this office, that office, any higher office that's opening up, she'd always turn to me, she goes, I don't think so, I don't think so. Your name is floated around more than probably anybody that I know for at least 15 other offices that have come up over the last 15 years. And she's always said no. So you know that her commitment to Salem is solid. Tran Nguyen.
So I have to say that there is value in diversity in and of itself. I think that new voices, fresh perspectives, different backgrounds make for richer conversations and more innovative solutions. And it's a privilege, but also a burden to be the first, because I don't want this to come off as I'm speaking for all Vietnamese American women. I'm not. But I do think, to your point, that we are setting an example. We are here, and it's good for younger students to see people who look like them, who speak like them. And we, as women of color, we have a different way of governing. We need to find our authentic voice. And that's something that we can pass along to other women. I'm here because I've spoken to other women who run and asked them what worked for you that might not work for a man running, for instance. And so the bigger the bench, the better it is. And we need to not only pull up a chair, pull up a chair at the table, but we need to pull up more chairs for others to come behind us as well.
Damali?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. For me, what I bring is I grew up in Chelsea, and I fell into the street culture that often sucks many of our young people in urban communities like Chelsea. I had an opportunity to work as a youth worker, and so I saw firsthand the issues and how policies made at a national level, how it trickles down to my backyard and how it affected people in my neighborhood, in my village. And so that's a unique perspective that I can bring to the table. But I also feel that it's, a lot of times when we talk diversity, we think race, and we scan the room to look for diversity. But it also has to be in terms of class and religion and race and disability, and in the many ways that being a woman intersects with so many other vulnerable communities. Because if we're just talking about being a woman, that's only half the conversation. And so that's something that I always stay mindful of, always trying to stay connected to all of the vulnerable communities, regardless of whether or not I speak their language. I'll find a way to connect with them. My Muslim community, I'm figuring out a way to connect with them. It just a way to lift. I just feel like it's incumbent upon us as women to speak from a place that's heart-centered, to be vulnerable, and to just be open to be inclusive. I think that our male counterparts failed at doing that, and it's up to us to be able to bring more voices to the table.
Very interesting. So you've been elected, you got into office. As an elected official, what was perhaps the barrier that most surprised you once you took office? I know some of you are still trying to get an office to begin with. But once you got in, what was the biggest barrier, and how did you find your way around it?
I'll take this one, Janet.
She obviously has got a good example.
For me, like for example, I'm city council president, and when I decided that I wanted to be city council president, I feel like the mentality was that some of the men that had been there for years felt that as a woman I needed permission, or that I needed to have asked them first. And I felt like, no, like I'm willing, I'm capable, I can do this. I was elected just like you. I was voted by the electorate just like you. I don't need to ask permission. It's very in your face, the patriarchy. Sorry, men, but it's real. It's very, for me, that was the hardest part. Or I don't typically conform to society's expectation of what a woman politician should look like or act like or speak like. You know, I show up to council meeting and sometimes I wear jeans and sneakers, and that's okay because there isn't a dress code. And again, I was elected just like you. And so I show up and, you know, people look at you up and down, and you just have to put your shoulders back and you stand there with pride and, yes, I was elected just like you. And just continue, just the judgments, you know. Leadership doesn't have a face. Leadership doesn't have a dress code. As long as you're willing to put your neck on the line and go out there and represent the people authentically, you just go ahead and do it. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, where you come from, what neighborhood you live in. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And so that's my story. Thank you.
It's a good one. Good lesson for all of us.
Well, this is true for being in office, but also during the campaign. I feel like because we don't have enough diversity in government, I have to really prove myself, because the assumption is, well, she doesn't, exactly to your point, she does not look like a typical politician. So you have to work so much harder to prove yourself and constantly prove yourself. So I find myself talking about my degree and how I went to law school, so I must know something. And these are things that are just not assumed right off the bat when someone looks at me. And the other assumption is that because I may look different than people, they think that I don't understand where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, we're in the same community. We care about the same things: schools, healthcare, transportation. These are things that we have in common, and we need to find common values. But that's not assumed first. So that was why it was so important for me to go door to door twice, so that people could see me for who I am and ask me questions and get to know me as a person. And it's the same thing now. I need to build these relationships face to face, person by person, to show them that I know what I'm talking about and that we share a lot more in common than differences.
So when I arrived at the State House, there have been over 20,000 men who've served in the legislature. When I was elected in 2015, there had only been 197 women in our state's history. And I thought, I'm going to make appointments to go talk to some of the women who have managed to get ahead here and to sort of figure out what their secret was. So I made an appointment with Speaker Pro Tem Pat Haddad, who's the highest ranking woman in the House. And she shared, immediately welcomed me in, shared a lot with me about what her experience had been there. And it was really, for her, it was two things. It was hard work and always being prepared. But she also operated from the perspective that she knew when she was in a meeting as the only woman, that she wasn't just sitting there representing herself, that she felt that sense that I'm here as all women who are here. So I always need to be on my game and need to be contributing. And then I met with Harriet Chandler. She was the Senate Majority Leader. And, I shared with her, I want to meet with you, I want to understand what, and she goes, oh, no, it's very easy. You just really have to work hard. She used another term, but you just need to work hard. Like, that's what you need to do. And I left both of their offices thinking, okay, well, I'm a hard worker, so, this isn't, I guess I thought there was going to be some big reveal about how, as a woman, you got ahead here. And it was, I guess, in some ways, very reassuring, because it was about being a hard worker and showing up and illustrating what you're capable of. And I have found that there. I have found that, if you are recognized as somebody who is going to do the hard work, then you are going to get the respect of your colleagues. And so I find that to be a good news story. I'm also, one of the things I expected when I arrived at the State House, we talk so much outside of the building about Republicans and Democrats, which is funny in one way, because that's not even half of the enrollment in Massachusetts. The majority of people are unenrolled. So whenever I hear the word bipartisan, I think you just left out half of the electorate in that conversation, because they don't necessarily identify as Republican or Democrat. But people think that is sort of how we align ourselves, and that you sort of walk around the building with an R or a D emblazoned on your head, and that is how you all greet each other, and that is how you are recognized. And again, I really found that the divide is much more, who are the people who are there, to your point, who all got elected the same way, but who really want to put their head down and do the hard work, representing their constituents and being part of policy discussions. And then there's a few people who are just there because they're really enamored with the fact that they're serving in that position. The good news is there's not that many of that group. For the most part, you know, I get excited to go to work every day because I get to work with many different people on many different issues. And so I sometimes wish that the way, and it is certainly different than the national level, I think, but in Massachusetts, we really go to do the work that we got elected to do. And we work in a very productive and collegial environment. I will tell you sometimes, I joke that the pace at the State House is a pace only a man would love, because as women, we really want to accomplish a lot, and sometimes you don't. But I love this opportunity, and I think it is like many things in life, it is what you make it. And so if you want to put your head down and work hard and seek out opportunities to get involved, you can, and it can be a really rewarding experience.
I'd say for me, two of the things that, especially as a new mayor, that were challenges, I'd say there were two things. One was work-life balance. I mentioned I had 3 kids, 3, 5, and 8. You are newly elected, and everybody wants you to be at everything. And if you're a people pleaser, you want to try and be at everything. So for the first few months, I was trying to be at everything and really quickly realized I got to get a hold of my schedule and lay down some rules just for my own sanity and to be able to make sure I had that balance, especially with young kids. So I think that was really important, like a reckoning of, okay, wait, this is my schedule. I need to make sure certain things are on it that I want to do, not all the things that people want to see me at. There's this responsibility that comes with office. You definitely want to recognize that, but there's also this responsibility with at home and family, and that was really, really critical for those first 6 months to learn that. The second thing that stood out to me was someone who's a leader, and certainly when you're mayor, you have to make decisions like every single day, right? Sometimes folks love those decisions, sometimes they don't, but a decision needs to be made. And as the first female making those decisions, I think people sometimes confuse somebody making a decision that you don't agree with as headstrong, not listening. When, no, we had a really good conversation. I heard everything that you said. I really appreciated that. And I just disagreed. That's...
Terms that they would never apply to a male politician.
Yes, apparently that's unusual, right? So I hope that, no one's in my position. We're not looking to have hostile relations or fights, or not very collaborative. And in Salem, we have a really active and engaged citizenry. So there's a lot of public discourse before any decisions are made. But ultimately, somebody's got to make the decision, and lots of times that's me. And people start to view leadership differently, I think, depending if somebody's wearing a skirt or a pair of pants. And some of those terms get thrown away. And I think we have to remind ourselves that that being a leader is exhibiting these skills, and it really doesn't matter whether you're in heels or flats making those decisions. And we want somebody making decisions. And I think, it's working in my community. I've been grateful to be elected 4 times and have a lot of support. So I think people actually want decisions being made and like having a positive aspect happening in their community. But early on, let me tell you, that was a big switch for folks, that somebody's making a decision, and they're making a decision that not everybody agrees with, and we're going to move forward. So I'll point that out.
I'll just add all of that, all of that. But I think, on the work-life balance, I have an 18-month-old at home, and I'm not going to be rude tonight, but if I run out those doors, it's because I want to go kiss my son before he goes to bed. And I think standing and owning that and not feeling guilty, it helps when your constituents also understand and respect that. And I'm blessed to represent a district and residents who do, but it can be really challenging when you run into folks who are like, I've invited you to this event, and I invited you yesterday. And I'm like, yes, I booked this months ago, you know, so it can be really challenging. But I'll add something that I think many have heard Congressman Presley speak of, which is, you know, not all women, not all black women, for example, are a monolith. We're not all the same. And so I think whether we call this a barrier or not, it sometimes can be really challenging if you go into a space and people think I'm the same person as Congresswoman Presley or Councilor Edwards or Councilor Janey because we all identify as black women. We each come with unique experiences and backgrounds and passions for the work that are different, and we work to support each other. But I think, you know, it's great to have more women, but to remember that we're not all the same. And I'll add to that a conversation I just had earlier today with a young woman of color. What does it mean for women to support other women? Some folks really, I'm naming that because it can be a challenge in our community, particularly in the city of Boston. I see some people clapping silently. You can clap loud on that. Calling that out. Women supporting women across every demographic. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have, you know, white women who believed in me, Latino women, Latina women believing in me. My chief of staff, Ellie, is a Latina. She's sitting over there. You know, and what does it truly mean to be allies and to work together in partnership, to trust and love one another authentically, and to demonstrate that for our young girls, because I think they see the energy in a room, and sometimes it may be great, and sometimes it's not. This is great because, you know, we had conversations in the back, and you created this space for us. Some of us just met for the first time, but women need to support other women, and we need to do it authentically.
You know, I'm not a politician. I've never run for office, but I have been covering politicians for a very long time. And I will say, when I first started in 1973 as a reporter at the State House, there were, I think, 4 women legislators. And there were mostly men that were at least 20 to 25 years older than I was. And most of them would not give me an interview. They wouldn't even stop to answer my question. I was working for United Press International at the time. But I learned eventually that the best way to get someone to talk to me was to go to the younger, newer legislators, the guys that were not too much older than I was. I ran into 2 of them. One was named Andy Card, and we know what happened with him. And the other one was Phil, I'm losing my mind now. What's Phil from Marshville? Phil Johnston, that's right. And they were thrilled to be interviewed by anybody because they had never been interviewed by anybody. But I tell you this story because the thread that I hear from other women who have eventually made it to the State House, who eventually became elected officials, is that women are really good at not driving at the wall, but going around the wall and finding another way. Men have a tendency, for the most part, not all of them, have a tendency if they run into a brick wall, they just keep pushing harder and harder and harder. Women don't waste their energy. They'll go around the wall, they'll find another way, they'll find another solution. And that's where I think there is a common thread regardless of what your party is, what your age is, or what your background is, or what your religion is. It doesn't make any difference. I think that is, would you say that I'm pretty much?
No, I think you are, and I think that is one of the talent of women. You know, not only are we multitaskers, but we recognize that we're not all going to be on the same place on every issue, but that's okay.
Right.
You know, that's okay. We might not agree on this one issue. It doesn't mean I'm not going to agree with you and work hard with you on the next issue. And I'm a member, as is Tron. We both serve on the board of directors of the Women's Legislative Caucus. And I really enjoy being a member of the caucus because part of what we also do is find ways to support each other. You know, we have sort of the things that as a caucus we want to work on, but we're really invested in each other's success. And we get to understand, you know, really what makes you work. Why did you come here? What are you interested in? What could we partner with together about? And it's really, again, it's an element that I have really enjoyed. I have worked on issues that I did not run on. You know, they came to the forefront to me because of other issues that were going on, policy things, and I thought, you know what, that's really interesting, and I think I have something I could give to that issue. And so I'm constantly trying to find ways to bring other women into opportunities that I think would be good for them. One of our new colleagues, Rep. Miranda, I knew that she was really interested in the disparity in maternal health, especially for African American women, and I happened to get a thing that was sent to me regarding a forum that was going to go on, a webinar, and I forwarded it to her and I said, hey, have you seen this? And she was so appreciative that someone actually thought to send her something on something she was interested in. I'm like, yeah, but that's what we as women do. Like, you know, we hear that you're interested in something and we try and find ways to include it. So I have found...
And there will be payback for that. I mean, it'll, you know, eventually someday she'll be able to do something for someone else who might be able to help you with something. You know, you never know about these things.
No, and I think, you know, and I don't, that's not an exclusive women thing. I mean, there are men at the State House who are very good colleagues who do the same, so I don't want to make it sound as if it's not. But I find in particular that we recognize that that's one of the things that we can do for each other, is to find ways to be supportive of what our individual priorities are.
Let's move this conversation a little bit onto the national level. Elizabeth Warren has latched onto her beloved dog Bailey as the campaign mascot. She tweets about him a lot, Instagram a lot. As a woman, do you think we need something even more than most male candidates that captures the voters' imagination to get into their political doorway, to capture their imagination? Is it harder for women, and is it in a sense a double standard, if it is? It's a question that I ask because we have for the first time so many women running for the top office. And I'm sitting there watching the different strategies and the different ways that they are all trying to separate themselves from the group. Do you think it's harder? Or do you think it's not much different?
I think it's harder. I don't think it's necessary. I think that a lot of times we as women internalize what we think power is supposed to look like. And a lot of these ways that we try to adhere is really oppressive, patriarchal ideologies that really we no longer have to serve anymore. Thank you. I am a large woman. I am a Puerto Rican woman. I have frizzy hair. I like hip hop. I show up. I don't care. I know that I'm adequately representing my community. I'm rooted deeply in my community, and I'm here to do the best. Absolutely, hands down. I don't think I need to conform or take, with all due respect to Miss Warren's dog Bailey, but I don't think I need to take any pictures with I don't need any props. I don't think I need any makeup. I don't think I need anything extra, because I think that showing up with integrity and authenticity is all that I need to serve. Woo!
And I just have to, I had goosebumps all over my body, you know, it's just, that's it, integrity, authenticity. And I have a crazy dog, his name is Spacky. I couldn't bring him here, he'd be trying to bite people, so like, no. But like, even when I joined the council, my hair was straight. My hair is naturally curly. And the people who push back on like, oh, do you want to change your hair or natural? Yes, because that's what I feel like today. And I want to switch it up, and sometimes people don't recognize me. Okay, well, that's your problem, not mine. You know, so it's, and what does that demonstrate, again, to our young people who every single day are trying to mold themselves into something they're not? I'm constantly talking to young people at schools and saying, do not try to be like the person to your left and to your right. I think you're here for a unique purpose. You have unique gifts and skills for something that will change the world. And if you don't do it, well, who's going to do that part? And I think by us being up here and showing up authentically, and wearing flats because you prefer flats, right? Wearing pants because you prefer pants, or sneakers, or jeans, or wearing your hair however you think you feel comfortable to do that. We should be encouraging each other to do that. And what can you imagine the example it sets for our young girls, but also our young boys? And I have an 18-month-old son, you know? I want him to be his authentic self. If he's a shy person, well, be shy. Introvert, be an introvert, you know? You don't like to talk to a lot of people? Okay. And we don't necessarily encourage that. You go into school sometimes and you're molded into being something else. And you're going to miss out, or it's detrimental to your health and your well-being. And we talk about that too, the importance of self-care. But it's detrimental. And it's like, I think I'm so proud to serve a woman who are like, the heck with all that. Be yourself.
Okay, lots of firsts. There are more Muslims elected, more younger women, more women overall. But how long is the road ahead? And am I being sort of disillusioned? I'm sort of deluding myself to think that I could see a 50% female Congress before I die. And I'm 68 years old, so there's not a lot of time left, okay? What do you think?
I mean, I think we're seeing this resurgence of so many younger women in particular who are exactly looking at themselves and seeing an opportunity to really change the world. Like this Me Too moment, I just think back years before, people just took it, right? You had to endure. And this generation is not enduring. They saying enough. And I'm really grateful for that.
So raise your hand if you think that I'll see a 50% female Congress before I die.
Yeah, come on.
All right. Andre,
You're
you're
gonna
the only
live
one going,
long.
I don't know,
I will
you're
say
asking
that.
for a lot.
I think we were, a couple of us were part of a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and whether it's talking about elected office or diversity in law enforcement agencies, all of these, our agencies, our companies, our boards, reflective of the demographics of the city women. And I think sometimes we set the bar so low. And so I'm in government and we're patting ourselves on the back, but I'm like, our goal is 30% or 15%. The population is over 50. Exactly. And so if we don't set the intention at the 50 mark, we're not going to reach it. And we're not doing that currently. So I think if we set the intention as 50% and not to settle for something less, then I absolutely think we can get there as a collective.
Also, I'd like to add that we also have a responsibility to lift our women who are running for office. So often we think we elect someone and they're in office and the job is done. But if that woman is not standing in her true power or is still conforming or is disillusioned by how she thinks she's supposed to show up in these places, then she's not really doing any justice for anybody. So I think that we have a responsibility to reach out to these women and have one-on-ones and support their campaigns and donate and check in with them and make sure that they're practicing self-care, which is something that we, especially as women of color and as moms, and it's just finding the balance that we need to make sure that we're supporting them, to make sure that they're standing in their true power to be able to adequately legislate.
I think, too, that the kids today, my husband and I have 3 children, 2 girls, 18 and almost 17, and a son who's 13. And my son was with me in the car a few years ago when the Supreme Court decision came down on gay marriage. And my son was in the back seat, and he said, "Mom, I don't understand why is this being talked about?" And I was trying to explain it, and he goes, "Yeah, but I don't understand. Why can't people just marry who they love?" And I thought, you know what? That's the benefit of your generation, is that's how you see this. But that, isn't what necessarily everyone else has grown up with that perspective. And so I think, we're starting to see this generation come up and start to make decisions around what's important to them. I do get concerned. I read an article 2 summers ago that the younger folks coming up see social media as the greater ability to force change. And I understand why that's a perspective, but what I try and tell my kids is when you don't vote, you are affecting change. You're just not making it a change that you actually want. You're not participating in it. And so I try to make sure that folks, especially younger folks, understand that voting and being part of the process is really critical. And it's not just about electing more women, in my opinion. It's about getting more women invested in the process of electing people. I mean, I'm a big believer that you should get involved as a woman, and if you think there's a great guy candidate that you really want to go support, that's fantastic. Go support that candidate, but be part of the process. It's not, and I think, the more women are part of the process, I think the better off women are going to be. But part of it is actually making the decision, if you do want to run. Women on average, you have to ask them 7 times before they will even consider running. Women talk themselves out of stuff all day long. They don't talk themselves in, they talk themselves out. And I joke, you never have to ask a man to run. They've already decided that they, of course, should run and they will get elected. But when men and women run, they win at the same percent, about 50%. So it's just being involved in the process and getting in there, which is the biggest determinant for us in the number of women that we have in elected office.
That's a real statistic, too, 7 times.
I completely agree with what everyone just said here. And in terms of, I think we having to go back to that, your point earlier about making sure that we have gender parity in all different areas. We need to talk about building a pipeline from the local level, because that's how you build your base. All politics is local, but also we need to make sure that young girls can see themselves in all different positions. It doesn't have to be an elected position. Like you were saying, work on an issue. If you're passionate about gun safety, do that. If you're passionate about an environment, do that. But be there, and show up for other women. And one of the other things that I'd like to remind my supporters and my base is that we need to give each other positive reinforcement, because women tend to be so critical on ourselves. So we need to hear that. We need to remind one another, you're doing a great job, Andrea. And so for those out there, that's really helpful to us, because we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and we want to hear that every once in a while.
So we want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A from you, but before I go ask for the first question, I'm going to ask you the same question I just asked these women. How many of you think that there will be a 50% women in Congress before I die? It's pretty good. I wish the rest of the population agreed with you. That's pretty good. Okay, we're going to take some questions. Let's take a couple from up there. There are a couple of folks, I think, with microphones. And all I ask is that you tell us what your name is, what city or town you're from, and then if you want to direct the question to someone specifically, tell us who it is. And we'll start with the woman there at the very top, yes.
Hello, my name is Aygün Şahin. I'm from Somerville. And I became American citizen, U.S. citizen in November. I'm so very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm extremely interested in running for office too, but my question is very practical. I don't even know how to get started. Like, practical tips would be very appreciated.
To run for office, you mean?
Yes.
Right, to run for office. Who wants to handle this one?
So did you hear the sponsors earlier today? One of which is Emerge Massachusetts. I'm going to do a shout out for them. I did the boot camp, but there is an amazing 6-month program. And what I got from that is the nuts and bolts of what are the different pieces. And as a woman, and I think I can speak to all of us here, we like to know what we're getting ourselves into. So it's really helpful to see all the different parts and to work at putting all those pieces together. So I highly recommend you seeking that out. But I think other groups are also wonderful in having different training and program all around. Please come to me after. I have a whole list for you, but this is the time to do it. Even if you are not if you're not going to run anytime soon, it's good to know so that you can put yourself in that position when the opportunity arises.
Or at least get on a campaign for someone who is planning to run and learn how it all starts from the grassroots level. Other questions? Anybody else up there that would like to ask a question? Oh, great, wonderful. Can we get a microphone to her? Is that possible?
Local office, but my question is for our Council President Andrea. Here's my question. Of the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Boston is the only one that does not have an elected school committee. Would you say, well, let me just say, in my experience, most women that get started in politics start at the less visible positions. And that position would be on the school committee. And in the city of Boston, we have a history of men and women graduating up in office, starting with the school committee. So, and also in our public schools, we don't have civic education. When I graduated from Boston Public Schools. The best experience I ever had was my civic classes. And I think we're not serving our young people well by not having real civic classes and really talking about the importance of an elected school committee and what that does in terms of engaging young people. So I'd like to hear your stance on that.
Thank you, Mukia, and thank you for the work you've done, and thank you for the question. So I'll start with the civics piece, and I have to give credit to my new colleague, Councilor Garrison, who also filed a hearing order on this and just had a hearing on the importance of civics in the schools. I had it at Latin school in the 9th grade, Mr. Myers, and actually he was a black male teacher. That's another issue, lack of diversity in our teachers. So it's a big deal and it makes a difference. On the school committee piece, it's not an issue right now that I'm grappling with. I'm actually doing almost like a survey within my district. There are folks who feel strongly that it should be elected and not appointed because they think the appointed school committee gets sort of rubber stamped by the mayor. There's a subset of folks who think it should remain appointed because of the history of an elected school committee in the city of Boston. And then there are some who've actually added a third question: do we need a school committee? So it's something that, I give Councilor Sabi George, who chairs the Education Committee, credit for taking on the conversation, and it's a conversation we're still continuing. And I actually have some folks who formerly served on the school committee who live in my district who are mixed about where we should go. But I agree with you, local, so whether it's school committee or the Boston City Council, obviously look at Congresswoman Presley. Most folks don't pay attention to the local level. We are doing incredible work. This is where it starts. This is where the pipeline starts. So folks, when you're thinking about supporting candidates, don't just look at the presidential candidates. Give to the local level. Sometimes it's really hard to get people to give at the local level. Your money goes a lot farther, frankly, at the local level than it does at the presidential or the other offices. Thank you.
Do I have a question from the floor here? Anybody? Do I hear something? No? Over here? Great. We'll get you a microphone. RBI. What does RBI stand for?
Red Sox Foundation.
I'm sorry?
The Red Sox Foundation.
Ah.
Yeah.
Your name and where you're from, and who would you like to answer your question?
I actually would like all of them to answer the question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Niliana. I'm from Boston. Well, originally born in Worcester, but from Boston. So I'm a student at Boston Arts Academy, and a couple of weeks ago there was a racist incident at a concert where a white student airdropped a photo of him. He colored himself black, and the thing was my school was the only diverse group there, and there was only one black judge. And so I want to know how you guys will react to it. But yeah.
Well, I just given, obviously I'm in Boston, heard about it firsthand. I work closely with the principal there, and even some folks who are involved in sort of the foundational philanthropic arm for the school. And I was angry. I was disgusted. I felt similar to the students, including yourself, I'm sure. But I will give credit to our interim superintendent and BPS and the president of the university in New Hampshire, who actually stepped up really quick, and former counselor Tito Jackson, who went to UNH to not only make sure that there's a thorough investigation, and that's still going on right now, but also to lend support in different ways to the students, and to call that out. And you can't do that stuff alone. Again, why go back to the point of talking about race, racism? People act like we are in this post-racial society. We are not. Stuff is happening every single day. It's hateful, it's disgusting, it's awful, and usually our young people are on the receiving end of some of this. So kudos to you, the team that went up, the school. But I was angry and I was upset. But then the question I always sort of end with is, well, what are we going to do about it? And I will say the response from the administration, New Hampshire folks, as well as former Councilor Tito Jackson, has been really great and supportive. But it's unacceptable on all fronts.
Kim, I hate to throw the question at you, but you are a mayor. When you have racial incidents crop up, have you figured out a way that's the best way to diffuse or to answer the question directly, or at least deal with the problem directly?
Yeah, and unfortunately we have had issues in our community. Thankfully, not many, but you have to stand up right away, whether they're incidents of teenagers or school children. You never know how serious some of these infractions are, where they're coming from. They're normally anonymous, but you treat them seriously. You stand up right away, and there's no space for that whatsoever. I think building cultural competencies, even in communities that are diverse, is still very much a challenge. Implicit bias exists. Having a school system that recognizes that we need to teach those practices, and we need to acknowledge those biases and talk through those issues as a community, and being a strong voice of recognizing that we are going to come to these discussions together. We have a community that stands up when things like this happen to come together, but it's awful, and it nobody wants that to define their community, their school, their class, but the only way we're really going to be able to overcome that if we're willing to have those conversations when these items are triggered. And unfortunately, they're happening more often, not less often.
Especially within the last few years, I would say. Question, what do we have? Oh, we got a couple back there. Yeah, that would be great. Your name and your city, please, or town.
Good evening. First, I want to just say thank you for this amazing panel. It's been so enlightening. So thank you for the work that you're doing. My name is Lisa Senka, and I'm the principal of an all-girls high school. We just started the high school this year. It's Malden Catholic School for Girls, and I have 4 of my amazing students here with me. So I want to give big kudos to them. Malden Catholic has been a boys' school for 85 years. And hello, it's 2019. We need a parallel school for girls, and here we are. And these young women took the opportunity to come to the school to lead it and create a brand new school. They are leading this school with me. And I'm extremely proud of them and also proud of the efforts of our school. I really would like to know what opportunities do you have or advice can you give me for these young women? Do you offer internships? How can we get them out modeling what you're doing? Because they need role models. They're eager and willing, but what advice can you give them?
And we're talking about high schoolers, is that correct? Who wants to tackle this one?
I think students who have an opportunity to participate in an externship, a little bit shorter time frame, or an internship, or even a shadowing opportunity can provide some insights into snapshots and chunk sizes of what's going on. I also think picking an issue and staying with it for the entire year as a school or as a community is something that I think allows a deeper understanding and also can obviously fit within curriculum and other needs that you might have.
And for my office, we have an internship program coming up. My legislative aide is here, and he's putting that together, and we are accepting applications from high school students as well as college students. But I think one of the most educational experience they could have is to work on a campaign to see what's happening on the ground. There are many local elections coming up. That's where they can lend their skill sets and knowledge. But like Kim was saying earlier, please reach out to us. I'm more than happy to have them shadow me or come with me to a hearing or go to an event with me. And I've also had high school students in my district reach out to me to do informational interviews. And I cannot stress that enough. So I wish I knew this when I was growing up, and I didn't, and I regretted it. But an informational interview is essentially an interview where you reach out to someone who's in a position that you want to be in eventually, and you ask them questions. What do they like about their job? What don't they like about their job? What's their day-to-day like? And that's how you can roll out what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And I encourage you to do that, and please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do that with you.
We got a couple of questions up here. The gentleman in the front there, can we get a microphone to him, please? And just give me your name and where you're from, and let me know if you want someone specifically to answer the question.
Well, so since the title is Women in Leadership, then I have to ask, what do you expect from men? Especially since you mentioned Elizabeth Warren, then I have to mention Bernie Sanders. What do you think Bernie can do something different this time to help to get some common good? That's my question.
So I can answer, what do we expect of men? I think it is to recognize the talent that women can bring to this position. And I think, I spend a lot of time talking to young women and encouraging them to be involved in the process. But I try and spend just as much time talking to young men because it has to be a two-way conversation. And I think that, I met with the Westboro Republican High School. The Westboro High School had a Republican group, and they asked me to come in and meet with them. And they were a great group of young men, and I said, where are the women? And they assured me there were some women who were part of their club. But I said, so what do you do to support women running? Have you gotten involved in town? Like, what candidates are out there? And really engaging in the conversation and asking about women running and what they think about it. And is there one that they see out there that they think is a particularly good candidate that they would like to support? But I think if we are only talking to women about running, that we are leaving half of the equation not focused on. And so the more that we can also talk to men about opportunities to get involved and to either help women who are running or to find, again, issues in which they feel that they can contribute to that maybe typically in the past have been looked at as women's issues. I mean, I tell folks women didn't fight for the right to vote to be able to participate in women's issues. They fought for the right to vote on all issues. And so I think it's important that we also don't limit ourselves. One of the things at the State House in the past is for many years the women would get assigned to the women's committees. They would be assigned to children and families or elder affairs or education. They wouldn't be assigned to financial services or transportation. And
it was like that for a very long time,
Yeah.
a very long time.
So we, having women in office is really important, but making sure those women who are in office are also where part of where the critical conversations are going on that affects our lives is just as important. And so making sure men are aware of that, it's not enough to sort of think, oh, no, more women are getting elected. But are they in the room? Are they part of the important conversations that are going on? And are they able to make an impact in those ways?
I just want to thank you for the question.
I think my expectation for men is partnership, right? I'm married to an amazing individual who never quivered about taking care of our children, right? Young children, was never babysitting, right? It was just you were there as their dad. I still think mothers tend to be the primary caregivers, making doctor's appointments, making sure the kind of household ticks the way it does. But my husband, I couldn't do what I do without having a super supportive spouse. And being a supportive spouse when you have a woman that's elected office is a necessity. So I want to call that out as for him and also the expectation, but also a partnership in terms of, I've had great mentors who were males who really encouraged me to take on additional challenge, helped me, gave me opportunities to do really hard stuff that were complex, and encouraged me to do that work. And I think that partnership can expand to helping a woman network into a field, helping take on challenges that perhaps have been disregarded or looked the other way in the past. And that's what I'm looking for.
Or simply cook the meals when she's too busy and do the dishes afterwards, right?
Laundry, folding and putting away laundry is like
yes,
the most romantic thing you can do for me.
And I just want to add, because we were just talking about this in the back, my baby right now is with my husband. He's not with a babysitter or nanny. He's with the love of my life. And we still love each other. We still like each other. And on tough days, that's where you go, right? So that is such an important piece, and they often probably don't get thanked enough. So it's really important. But one thing I'll add that I was talking about just earlier today, frankly, we're all in this together. So if we're talking about the issues in particular, and I just want to draw out one issue, violence against women, sexual assault, domestic violence. I gave kudos to Councilor Flynn, who I serve with on the Boston City Council, of our partnership in that work. It shouldn't just be women taking on these issues, just like it shouldn't be black people just talking about racism. We are all in this together, and if we want to shift cultures and systems, We need our allies, we need our male allies to show up in this work. It is so critical and crucial. And I think that, just earlier today we were talking about a concrete example of that. The woman that recently was killed, her family lives in my district. And it's not just about accountability for bars and safety of bar owners. We're talking about violence against women. And to have my male colleagues stand up there and say, yes, there's a problem and we need to do a lot more, there's incredible power in that. It pulls in, obviously, another constituency. But it's also recognizing that we all have to play a role in shifting this culture. And men absolutely have to be a part of certain conversations when they have been the majority of the folks in a particular system for a long period of time. And so I think it's absolutely critical on the issue front. I just wanted to name that.
And to add to that, I talked earlier about women amplifying each other's voices, but men should amplify our voices too. We've heard of instances where, if I say something, no one listens, and then a man says it, and then all of a sudden, what a great idea. Well, what you can do as a man is attribute it back to me and say, actually, Trump said that first. You might want to listen to it. That's how you can help us.
I would just like to point out, if I could, that's a very good point. I would like to point out my husband is here tonight, and I do. He's hiding right there.
He was taking a lot of pictures.
Yes, but I do appreciate that point, and I think too, again, being able to be vocal and actually say that we have strong support systems who help us do this is not a bad thing. We should be talking about that because, again, many women think they can't do this role. Part
or
of
too
that,
many think they can do it all by themselves, right?
And so, I'm very fortunate to have a husband who is a partner with me on that. And I did also just want to point out his mom is here with him tonight. So moms, we have a great thing that we can do with our boys, which, again, starts at a young age in terms of encouraging them to see that women have strong potential.
Which goes back to your original thought earlier in this conversation about how it's not just the issues that brought you to the game or brought you to the party, it's the other issues that you learn about, regardless of what color you are, what sex you are, what your background is. And you learn to help each other in ways that you just didn't even possibly thought of when you first won the office and you came in. Questions? We have, someone in the back there, the woman at the very, very top.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful conversation.
Your name and your city, please.
My name is Lisa Sunding, and I'm from Connecticut. My question is this. First, you're all very accomplished and confident women who I hope all the young women here aspire to be, and maybe some of us who are older also aspire to be. But imposter syndrome is real, and so I'd like to know, how do you deal with it when that gremlin shows its ugly head?
So I'm not familiar with imposter syndrome. Would you mind elaborating?
Great. Awesome. Well, I don't want to plant the seed, but because I asked the question. So imposter syndrome is the sense that you've had accomplishments, but you sometimes feel that you've gotten to where you are not by your own accomplishments, but by something else, or that maybe you're a fraud, or people are going to find out that you're really not worthy to be where you are. That's imposter syndrome. And I'd love to know that you never feel that, but I know there's a lot written about imposter syndrome specifically with women, and not just women who are not in office, but women who are also in leadership positions. So if you've experienced that, I'd like to know how you deal with it.
I'm sorry, I've been too real, too authentic. I've never felt it. But maybe I'll read up on it and I'll get back to you on that.
I think I totally agree. We're all like, just be yourself. Just be yourself. And I think, do we feel a sense of nerves? I think we named some of that. Some of us did some deep breaths in the back, some stretching and bending over stretching and throwing your hands up, shaking it out. And then you go out there and you be yourself. And you surround yourself with people who encourage you to be yourself. I think that network, whether it's our family, our church community, a girlfriend, that constructive feedback, pull those people close so that you don't show up with that. Because no.
I think it's fair to say that each one of you probably got into politics because there was a fire in your belly, there was something that made you mad, something unfairness, something that was unjust, or a total belief that you could change something if you got into the position to be able to change it. And I think that probably is the one uniting factor that brings most women politicians, not just women, but all politicians, that brings them to the table, gets them to run for office, and eventually, hopefully, they win. If not the first time, maybe the 5th time, but they don't give up. I've been told that we are now at the end of the evening because some of us have to get to bed, especially us older folk. So I'm going to throw this back to Dr. Grant.
Thank you. And before I say a few words, see, women helping women, this is awesome. Before I just say a couple of words, I'd like a huge round of applause for this incredible panel and Janet Lee. You know, listening to each of your stories and what propelled you to the seats that you're in is inspiring, and it's encouraging, and it's complicated, and it's not complicated. And I want to thank you for your service, for your leadership, because it comes with sacrifice. It comes with trade-offs. Andrea, you know, we're going to clear the deck so you can run home and put your 18-month-old to bed. But I want to thank you for stepping forward and for making a difference and for taking this time, because each of you have so many demands and pulls on your time. That you're here this evening to talk about this demonstrates that you are committed to encouraging others to step into public life, because it is complicated but incredibly rewarding. Janet, I want to thank you for your years of service, for asking hard questions,
It's easier to ask the questions than to have to answer them, let me tell you.
And doing it so well and drawing out public stories. And I hope that all of you that are here this evening will see this as the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. We'll think about how you support each other in doing your work, how you support the women that are here, the leaders that are emerging, community by community, office by office, who are bringing different voices and perspectives to the issues of the day at the local level that contribute to changes at the national level and at the global level. Everybody can make a difference, and I think that's what we inspire to do here every day at the Kennedy Institute. So we are honored and delighted to have all of you with us. To the young ladies that were here earlier today, thank you. Keep pushing your voices. They're strong and powerful. And I want to just leave you with the words of a woman that I know many of us admire, Michelle Obama. And I think it will kind of put a little capstone on this evening. And she says, and I think I heard it tonight in all of you, that here in America, we don't let our differences tear us apart. Not here, because we know that our greatness comes from when we appreciate each other's strengths, when we learn from each other, when we lean on each other. Because in this country, it's never been each person for themselves. No, we're all in this together. We always have been. So let's continue to do that and practice that in small ways and in big ways and every day in the work that we do. And I thank all of you again for your service. Good night. Thank you.